There's not that many news outlets that are covering Canadian Jewish arts these days, so we're really doing something unique. Hi, I'm Ilana Zakon.
And I'm David Sklar.
And we're the hosts of Culturally Jewish.
In these times right now of growing anti-Semitism, I think a lot of Jewish artists are feeling very isolated from their own arts communities.
You know, it's very isolating being in the arts world in Canada, and we get a chance to meet people from all over the country who are dealing with it in all sorts of different ways.
It also makes me feel more proud to be a Jewish artist right now. We would say there's no one out there who understands what we're going through, who feels the way we feel. Are we going crazy, right? Or is the world going crazy? And when we get together and we chat with these artists, we say we are not alone, that there are other people who are going through the same thing. And it actually makes me more proud to be a Jew and a Jewish artist.
To support our work and to keep up to date on everything that's happening at the Canadian Jewish News, visit thecjn.ca/donate.
Seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized. They are associated with all kinds of very, very serious illnesses, including...
That's the voice of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., speaking last fall to a Fox News reporter about seed oils, including canola, which he and other wellness influencers, including Joe Rogan, call the hateful eight, like corn oil, soy oil, and sunflower oil. Oils refined from seeds of these plants have become lightning rods, with RFK Jr. saying they're partly to blame for America's obesity epidemic, and he wants McDonald's to stop using them and instead fry with beef tallow. And he's making headlines because today, the controversial health guru will likely come one step closer to being confirmed as Donald Trump's new Secretary of Health and Human Services. While most doctors and scientists in North America think he's peddling conspiracy theories, his specific war on seed oils has been setting off alarm bells here in Canada, because Canada is the largest canola producer in the world. It's worth $35 billion a year to the Canadian economy. We make a quarter of the world's canola oil supply, and most of that is sold south of the border. So any health laws against it threaten our export market. And all this is happening against the backdrop of the current tariff war between Canada and Donald Trump, if Ottawa is now talking about slapping retaliatory tariffs on our exports. And watching all of this from his perch in Winnipeg is internationally renowned biochemist and food scientist Professor Michael Eskin. Eskin is considered one of the pioneers of edible canola oil, dating back nearly 60 years ago when he arrived at the University of Manitoba from England, and he began working with the oil made from a grain originally called rapeseed. He and his team turned it into an oil that not only smells better and lasts longer without spoiling, but most importantly was higher in healthy, heart-smart, unsaturated fats that have become proven to reduce cholesterol. And then they gave it a new name, and it became a staple of global diets.
I'm not sure what the problem is with the seeds. Is it in the agricultural growing of it? Because the quality of is good, has been shown to be healthy.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, and made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Professor Eskin has won the Order of Canada, the Order of Manitoba, and about 15 awards for his work. In November, he was inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. He's still teaching at age 83 about food and nutrition at the University of Manitoba, and he's got 19 books to his credit, 150 scholarly papers, and, oh yeah, he has a sideline as a rapper. Actually, he's recorded music videos to teach students about why we need fats and all about proteins. Those are some of his greatest hits. And that makes sense because Eskin is also professionally trained as a cantor. He worked as a chazan back in his native England, and then in Winnipeg for decades at an Orthodox shul. Eskin does like some of RFK Jr.'s other ideas, but he wants the soon-to-be health czar to leave canola alone. Eskin joins me now.
My pleasure.
The issue that you've spent your life working on, which is seed oils, has become front and center in the wellness industry, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. attacking the health benefits of canola oil and other seed oils. He said they were toxic, they're poisoning Americans, and this is all big news now.
I am aware of it, yeah. Certainly on canola and a lot of these other edible oils, there's been so much research done, human research and health research, that show the benefit of. So I'm not sure what aspect the concern is. I know at his hearing today, I noticed he said he's not going to go after the Big Mac, okay, but he will inform people what's in it.
He said that McDonald's should start using beef tallow instead of seed oil to fry their food. That seed oils are one of the driving causes of the obesity epidemic, unquote.
It's interesting because the American Food Guide was a pyramid, and they got so paranoid on fats, they almost eliminated it. And during the period of time, they had never had such obesity, and the nutritionists realized they made a terrible mistake. What was a terrible mistake? Fats ain't bad, and what happened was everyone was gorging on refined sugar. What he's against, and I agree with him absolutely, this refined product that is used in everything.
Yeah, the high fructose corn syrup.
High fructose corn syrup. And there's no question about sugar is an inflammatory. However, I must admit, I reviewed a paper recently on all the alternatives to sugar, stevia, etc., and they're all neurotoxins. So my recommendation was, if you have to have sugar, have it very occasionally and very little.
Tell us a bit about how your work changed the smell and the toxicity and the taste and the shelf life of this oil, which has now been a $30 billion a year industry for Canada.
Yes. Well, essentially, origin of canola is not indigenous to Canada. In the 30s, a Polish farmer, a friend of his, who came to Saskatchewan, sent him some seeds, and he grew them, and they grew extremely well. And what happened was, of course, in the Second World War, there was a real shortage of marine oils for the engines, and rapeseed oil was a wonderful lubricant. And so they suddenly had this growing program in Canada to produce the oil. And once thankfully the war came to a close, and with the development of the diesel engine, they didn't need a lubricant anymore. So there was actually a Jewish fellow in Agriculture Canada, I forgot his name, who said, well, maybe there's something in this. Well, maybe it has some edible properties, but it smelled bad and it looked bad, and what to do? Maybe because something can be done with it. And when I came in 1968 to Winnipeg, Canada, they were producing an oil with a markedly different composition. In fact, the composition was so good, it was very low in saturates and about 8 to 12% omega-3. Very few plant oils at that time had omega-3. And so we did the composition, we did the testing of the stability, we did frying and performance, we did the whole gambit. In the meantime, my other colleagues were feeding it to students and analyzing feces and urine. Okay, we always knew on a Monday morning when we came into the lab, we had this very powerful odor in the hallway, so we knew what they were up to. And so they found it extremely beneficial in terms of cholesterol. So it was the heart healthy oil. We were in the early part of it, and we had no idea of the impact of that work was. But once it got FDA approval, and it just shut off, and things really moved very, very fast.
The theories of these food critics now are that when you fry it, that it produces toxic problems, leading to inflammation and chronic illnesses.
I mean, just very briefly, 30 years ago, medicine realized that all the diseases that we suffer from are all related to oxidative stress. You name it, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's cancers, where you name it, it's all oxidative stress. Why is it oxidative stress? Because essentially we are biologically oxidizing machines, and we have trillions of cells operating. What happens is that in the metabolism, we produce free radicals, and these free radicals could damage nucleic acid, they could damage protein. And what happens is, if they damage the nucleic acid, then the cell could become a cancer cell. Because normally all cells communicate. A cancer cell becomes an independent unit, does not communicate with any others, and just grows and grows and grows. And it can metastasize, spread. So that is the impact of oxidative. In Canada, they used to hydrogenate. So they had hydrogenated all oils so they didn't oxidize. What happens is, in the hydrogenation, the hydrogen switches like that. That's why it's called trans.
I am so excited to learn this. I never knew that. Thank you.
It's the relationship between
trans body.
So that's what happens. And as a result, though the trans double bonds behave like a saturated bond, the only problem is they're not good for your health. And there was a Professor Kumaro at the University of Illinois who petitioned FDA on his research, and he told them hydrogenation is very bad. He said trans fatty acids are very bad, but FDA ignored him. And at the age of 100, he took FDA to court. And he won. He wanted to make a point that they knew about it and they did nothing. The Europeans have a different way. It's called transesterification, and that's why Becel margarine does not have trans, because it's made that way.
Phew, that's the only margarine we have in our house, because A, it's kosher, and B, it's vegan. No dairy.
No, but now, so it took that many years, over 50 years, to finally the FDA agreed. And so what happened was that they had to find an alternative way they couldn't hydrogenate. So they developed what's called a high oleic canola oils. Omega-3 actually is interesting. Omega-3 are very, they're both healthy, but omega-3 is much more potent as an anti-cancer. Linoleic acid, which is omega-6, is not, but
well, this is where they're targeting, is the linoleic omega-6. They're saying that it when it fries, it's bad for you. So back to what the controversy is.
Normally, everything is fairly controlled in the industrial frying. They fry at 180 degrees. Okay, it's controlled. Whereas if you're pan frying, you have no control. So you should never, ever use that oil again. Never. Because that oil is heated over 200 degrees, who knows? It's a very flat surface, oxidizes. Now, whereas the industry, they are very concerned about the oxidized products, which can be dangerous for your health, but they monitor that very carefully. There's no question that frying is quite a rigorous process. I used to tease my students that if you caught by cannibals and you give them the choice to be boiled or fried, go with boiling, because maybe there's a chance you'll be saved. Once you go into the frying, I said that's just 180 degrees versus 100. But either way, I wouldn't recommend either. So Europe actually had legislation. All the countries had legislation.
And the Europeans are a lot more ahead of Europe when it comes to health anyway for years.
And part of the problem has been, I'm sorry to say, FDA. Also, I don't have too much faith in WHO either, or Fauci's group. I'm sorry, they have not been responsible except for themselves. So that's where the concern is. But there is tight control and everything is tested. You don't get the high oleic, you get the regular, right? You get the regular oil, which really is a solution of triglycerides. The industry now uses high oleic.
Okay, so this is for the industry and not for ordinary consumers. Got it.
That's right.
Do you use canola oil in your life? Have you used it?
Oh, I've used it. We use it. I don't do too much frying. Okay, do relatively little frying, but you do use canola. We use a lot of olive oil as well.
So do we mostly.
Yes, no, we do use both.
So you're saying that you're not sure why the product that's made in Canada is under controversy because the production and the handling has been proven to be safer than what's been made out now in the popular press, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I recently wrote a story about the editorial landscape of campus newspapers, how many student newspapers throughout the country are rejecting pro-Israel perspectives. It also focuses on what students are doing about it. This was an important story that I think highlights the cultural war that's taking place on campuses right now as students continue to adopt an anti-Israel and, in some cases, anti-Jewish perspective. My career as a journalist actually started at a student newspaper years ago, so this was a full circle moment that's allowed me to revisit my roots and see how much has changed in a post-October 7th world. My name is Mitchell Konski. I cover campus life and education for the Canadian Jewish News. If you want to support this work and everything else that we do at the CJN, please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can also get a tax receipt.
I know you do lots of rap music. I've watched some of your videos. Have you decided you're going to send some of these to RFK Jr. to talk to them about, because this is a big industry for Canada. It's the second most exported crop. There's a lot at stake here.
I think he's going to have to be sort of fairly careful because it's a very powerful industry. I mean, in Canada, you have 43,000 canola farmers. And that generates about $30 billion. I think you'll find that the American Oil Chemist Society, for example, they will probably have all the industries coming out with a defense against tallow. I can't imagine frying in tallow.
You said you're teaching now before we end. What are you working on now in terms of your next productions?
Okay, I just published my 18th and 19th book this year, Functional Foods and Chronic Disease.
Congratulations. That's a lovely cover. You're with another colleague.
Our colleague is Michel Aliano. This is the second book we've done together. We have a third book that I'm doing that we've just signed for, Diet as a Complementary Treatment for Cancer and Therapy. For example, China has fatty liver disease. 250 million of their population have this.
Give us a preview. What is causing it?
Very heavy drinkers, and the diet mixture. One of the things that I real concern was when COVID came, there was no debate around. You either agreed with the establishment, or there were doctors who lost jobs. There was no debate at all, and people were making fortunes out of this. I have very mixed feelings. I'm not going to get into the COVID vaccine. But one of the things they should have done, the health authorities should have encouraged vitamin D. Very cheap, which was the problem. It was too cheap. That's my cynical. And people who had low vitamin D levels, and research has been shown in Israel and a lot, went into respiratory problems. It's a shame on the authorities. Canada is no less. Ivermectin paper now has shown it to be very powerful anti-cancer properties. Everything the other side said, they were put in Cherem, as they said.
Mm-hmm. I can see why you would have more sympathy for the views in the Trump administration, because that's what they promoted and still do, yeah.
I mean, I've been vaccinated, etc. I have taken COVID vaccines, but I will not. Unlike Kennedy, I do not take the flu vaccine.
Speaking of Orders of Canada, when you got your Order of Canada, they called you Nisan Akiva Michael Eskin.
Yes, I go by Michael. Nisan was my grandfather, who was actually the rabbi in Bobroysk in Russia, and he had maybe 9 children. My father was the oldest one, 19 years old, when the family sent him to England. He had a certificate for Schieter, so he ended up in England, and he married the daughter of a sheikhet, and he had four kids. And
So you could have been a sheikhet, but you ended up being a scientist.
oh, no, my father had no intention to be a sheikhet. He may have liked to be a cantor, but I've done cantorial. In my long career, I've served as associate dean of my faculty, and so when there was a 100th celebration, the lieutenant governor at the time was Janice Philman, and she was a graduate, and we worked closely together. So when I got the Order of Manitoba, she insisted I perform one of my items, and there's one about the nutritionist, and there's one about foods. It was called Before Food Science, People Did Eat. I'm reviewing the situation on how every new nutritional fad is spread by those nuts who love fitness and never ever seem to go to bed. You won't see them at Claridge's. They're too busy chewing cabbages, doing aerobics day and night in outfits that are far too tight. They only drink raw carrot juice, and if you stray, you're in a noose. I think I better think it out again.
I love that, and I appreciate it. That is also, for our listeners who may be of a certain age, they might get where that comes from. I'm reviewing the situation. For younger people, it's from Oliver the musical, so Oliver Twist, yeah.
The other one I have is Before Food Science, People Did Eat Fresh Fruits, Vegetables, and Meat. Nobody ever thought there'd be a food a scientist. It is a very strange endeavor to eat some chemical dish, even soybean-based liver, or even synthetic fish. My optical sublime, I shall achieve in time to make or process foods a crime, or process foods a crime.
I'm honored that you gave me that little ditty. I appreciate it.
I'm thinking of maybe doing a CD of that if I could.
You should. Sponsored by the CJN. I'm on it.
Because I have a few things like the omelet soliloquy, to eat or not to eat.
That's right.
See, this is a hot dog I see before me.
Costco hot dogs or Fibre National, whatever.
Yes, I may eat hot dogs twice a year.
No one is perfect. All right. And lastly, rapeseed is not, they didn't change the name because it's for the word rape to make it more palatable, did they? Or they did?
Well, they had to change the name, and they were going to change it to Canberra, but a company already took that name, so they had to figure. So Canada and Olay and oil, so canola.
It wasn't for trademark, right?
Politically correct, yes. Yeah.
I always wondered, so now I know. I've learned so many things today in this 50-minute interview. Thank you so much for being on the CJN Daily. It's been an honor. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. Our show's produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and the music is by Dov Beck-Levine. And speaking of music, go to the links in our show notes to learn more about Professor Eskin's body of work and to watch one of his rap videos that he produced for his students. Thanks for listening.
My name is Michael Freeman. I am the director of the Canadian Jewish News Podcast Network. When we first started podcasting at the Canadian Jewish News, we had to use the boardroom, and there was this wall of huge hardcover tomes filled with back issues of the CJN print edition, the old weekly paper dating back to the 60s and 70s. And because our microphone setup was not what you would call professional, my co-host and I had to prop up our microphones on these giant books, these tomes. We were literally recording on top of history. Today, the CJN Podcast Network has around a dozen shows. We're at 2 million downloads all time. Like everything we produce at the CJN, our podcasts are totally free. There's no paywall. You can listen to everything for free forever. But we do rely on the community to keep us going. And you can help. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a tax-deductible donation.